last time we had talked about, um, right before, we talked about Ann Arbor and, becoming a mom, and so this and Nelson Avenue, and so figured this week we talk about moving to Pearl River, and obviously you were there for what, like almost 15 years, so
Probably about, yeah, 12 years or
12 years.
thereabouts. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
because you moved there right before my dad started school, and then you left right after he graduated. Yeah.
okay. So, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think, yeah, when he graduated, your father graduated from high school right after that. And we only moved down to New Jersey, which wasn't far away, about 15 minutes. But yeah, it was, the time up there was interesting for me. Uh, I had a neighbor who came over and we became friends, and she got me involved with the League of Women Voters at that time. Uh, the next thing I knew, I was introduced to the president of the league, and I was on the board, and was on the board for the entire time that I was down there.
So
Uh,
what year was that?
just before, I guess your father started school.
So you were involved like the pretty much the entire time you were in Pearl River.
Yeah, and it was interesting to the first tea I was invited to was at the home of the woman who founded and was president of that particular league, whose name was Mrs. Charles MacArthur. The world knew her better as Helen Hayes, the actress. Her son was on Dano on Hawaii Five-O.
Hmm.
Um, so it was interesting. I never met her because she had loaned the house for the tea, but she wasn't there. She was off doing something or other, which was unfortunate. And the gal who was president was somebody that, as I say, sort of adopted me and got me very involved. So I began to meet people. One of the women who was then in like my age, in her mid 80s, marched with her mother in the suffragette parades. And she was retiring and moving up to Cape Cod uh, after all those years, kind of thing. There were a woman on board who was the wife of one of the Supreme Court justices in New York State. And her advice was, when you're not home, leave your house open, who cares? The only time you lock it is when you're there to protect yourself and your family. That was the attitude. It was interesting. Interesting women at that time. Over the years, what I watched happen was the extreme left, the liberal group, the ADA, Americans for Democratic Action, things began to take over the league. And I had problems with some of their, um, not their left views. Politically we agreed on a lot of things. I didn't like the fact that they didn't have a balanced board. They were pushing everything to the left with people, hacking the court, so to speak, or hacking the jury. So by the time I got to be president, I tried to balance it. So I called a friend of mine and I asked her to come on the board. I said, we need some Republicans. She said, how did you know? I said, I looked up your stuff, found out how you were registered, and I'm trying to get the board more balanced. And so I did so. Uh, I like argument, and I like when the league comes out with a position that it was something that could be accepted by all. It wasn't, totally one way or the other. I found out from a friend of mine who was a conservative that the head of the Conservative Party did not attack us during the time that I was president because she felt I was fair. But she watched very carefully to make sure. So I guess that was my reputation with regard to that kind of thing. Um, let's see, during that time, as I say, met some interesting people. I wound up working with a couple of people from the state assembly and senate, and 1 year even rewrote the New York State Constitution. They redo it every 10 years, and I decided that we had just done a study on it that I chaired, and I decided to talk to the people on the committee uh, in Albany and see what changes we could make that would make it more fair in my view. They accepted all of what I proposed except for one appointment versus election kind of thing. And that was because the governor at the time, Nelson Rockefeller, goes way back, wanted to appoint somebody to that position. So everything I proposed was accepted except for that one thing.
Do you remember what what you proposed? What were the things that you added?
No, basically it was just making it fair, more open, that kind of thing. So what I felt was good governance or better governance.
What year was that?
That goes back to, let's see, I don't know. What did you say? We moved in back in 1960 something?
60. Yeah.
It's
Because you were like 61, 60, 61, right? Because my dad was born 56.
Yeah, so probably somewhere during the 60s. Yeah. And as I say, I spent a lot of time doing that kind of thing and doing the working with the temple that we belong to, doing their uh, social service work in a sense. If they had things that they wanted done in the newspaper or so on, I did that too. I even drew a picture of uh, it was used as an editorial poster in the newspaper on the editorial page. It was something that they told me like the night before, so I quickly drew something. It wasn't the greatest, but it was published. So I am an editorial cartoonist as well. So I was lead woman or something like that, but dressed in a suit, very properly attired. But I also created a lead woman who looked like a Wonder Woman, who flew through the air and things like that. And I would do that for some of our internal stuff. In those days, you didn't have the computers. So if you made a poster, you had to draw it and then have it mimeographed and things like that to get it out there. So it was a whole different world. And I did the not only annual reports, but annual report covers. And I think I have them listed in the book as well, some of the pages of it. So I had fun doing the artistic work as well. Later, as you may have heard, I was a logomaniac. I did logo design for the projects that Marvin Company did. So it fulfilled my political and artistic aspirations.
Nice.
Yes, it was interesting times.
So what else did you do as part of the league?
As I said, I conducted studies on things like China. And I remember inviting a priest, Father Woods, I think was his name, who had served in China. And I invited him to my house for a tea or, to have some of our committee people meet him and hear about the discussions on China. And as I was walking down the street the week before, one of my neighbors stopped me and asked if she could come to the thing. She read about having an expert on China. And she had Wedgwood and and I explained to her, no, this was a political thing about China, not dishware. So uh, it was interesting. But if she wanted to come, I told her she, of course, was welcome. She said no.
Oh man, that's embarrassing.
Well, it was the way things were then. Um, when we first moved in, for example, the builder who built our house uh, knew that Marv was an architect. But he said he would check and double check everything after we leave because he was afraid come closing time, he would come in with a list of things that needed to be corrected. His partner um, used to stop by, was always bitching about the fact that he had to get us 2 window boxes. Something I wanted because it balanced the look of the house. So to make up for it, I had to make him sardine sandwiches for lunch when he would stop by. Because it reminded him of his mother's. So things like that.
Hey, if I have to make sardine sandwiches to get window boxes, that's fine.
I didn't have a problem with it.
Right, yeah.
It was fair. Yeah, it was always interesting. And the builder himself was somebody who was married, it seemed like every other year, to somebody else. He didn't just have affairs with people, he married them. And he theoretically had an affair with at least one person in every subdivision that he built was his reputation. So when he came to visit Maud, and sometimes being afraid that I might be home alone or something, would park his car 2 blocks away because he didn't want my reputation.
I mean, at least he knew what his reputation was.
Well, he was the Arab, descended from, and the other one, his partner was the Jewish one. So it was an interesting combination. We met a lot of interesting people there.
Yeah. What made you choose Pearl River?
Actually, Mark was working for a firm that was in northern New Jersey, and one of the partners lived up in Pearl River. And it was very convenient to get to the office from there without having to cross the bridge and all that stuff. And that's what brought us up there. And shortly after we moved up, he quit anyway and started his own firm. So it really didn't matter, but that's what brought us there. And it was a pleasant, growing community at that particular time. And it was on the other side of the Tappan Zee Bridge, which was the highway that, went from New York City all the way upstate to Buffalo. And that bridge was why they built it across the Tappan Zee, I don't know, because it was a beautiful area of the river that broadened south of West Point. And sailboats and things like that were always out there. And that's where I met Nelson Rockefeller, because he used to keep his yacht on our side of the river. I think it was cheaper. I don't know. But Mark teases me about the fact that I had once said I didn't realize he was that short, because he was, to me, no bigger than I was. He said, but you didn't have to say it so loud so he could hear you. We were used to eat at this restaurant down by the pier, so it was, we would see him from time to time as well.
Nice. Yeah.
It's the years that we lived there really were good. They were fun for me. Everything usually was. And when we did finally move down to New Jersey, because Maud was trying to decide what to do, when you're in the profession of architecture and building, every time there's a recession, everything slows tremendously. So it was time for him to change. And that we waited until your father had graduated. And then we made the move when Stace was just starting, middle school, and Paul was just starting high school. And then we moved down to Ridgewood, which had an excellent reputation, so, for schools. And Paul played soccer. Your father was on the baseball team, and I don't know if he did basketball at high school. I don't think so. But I think he did track and baseball.
Yeah, I know he did those. He might have done basketball too, but
Well, he hadn't shot up yet.
right.
So, but he was very active in a lot of stuff. He did play basketball for the Catholic Church with his friends. And one of the mothers asked me if it was all right with me, because the priest would sit and talk to him. I said, they're not discussing religion, they're discussing basketball. I have no problem. He's not planning on converting. So, we had that kind of thing. When we first moved in, speaking of neighbors, we found out that the house behind us, which was on the main road, that backed to us, and our house and several other houses along that stretch behind us, had sewer rights paid for. Other people in the community, that new community, had to pay for their sewers. We were exempt because the woman who owned the property to begin with had paid the original fee. So it was my job to go and tell the three houses that were affected in addition to ours. Two of them I had no problem with. Their kids used to play with ours and babysit. But the one across the street, he was convinced that we made a deal with the builder and got exempted from it, and spread this around the neighborhood. So people looked at me like, they didn't trust me. Until they got to know us, but that was at the beginning. So it was interesting times.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to figure out is, I've got you full screen. Okay. I don't know what he's got on and off here. So anyway, I don't know how to operate this. What else? As far as Pearl River is concerned, when I first started, as I say, with this gal, Jenny, Virginia, she got me involved with the Friends of the Library and the PTA and several other things. Although she didn't live in our community, she lived in a different area of the county. And it dragged me into the league. So I got involved in a lot of things in a hurry. And that's when I began to be the, community activist. Is that the term?
I like that term. It sounds right.
Okay. Well, that's where it started.
Yeah.
For somebody who was basically quiet, publicly, not privately, never. Although I said I approach every subject with an open mouth. So,
Right.
and I grew up arguing because of my father. I loved argument for argument's sake. So, I tell people, I think I mentioned that I started arguing Taft-Hartley versus the Wagner Act by the time I was 10 years old. So,
So I know they're like, didn't you guys like start, or like didn't Grandpa like design like the Little League field and like that sort of thing?
yes. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
I don't know where he is. All right, he's got it. the building inspector for the that area, our town, was interested in getting it started, and Maud worked with him in designing and laying out the fields and getting it started and built, helping raise the money for it. And with the building inspector putting pressure on a lot of the businesses needed approvals, it worked. And so, yeah, he did design and build that along with Mooney Pocket, yes. And the women played a opening game, a fundraising game, Bunnies and the Tigers. I don't remember. I think I was on the Tigers, played first base. And we had fun with it. Also, he was involved with things like the JCs. And most of these people went on to become the various leaders in the community as the community grew. And that too was interesting. There was one guy that I needed to talk to when I was involved with the league, and he was on a team from New City. We were Pearl River, and we played a game against them. It was my two-run, drove in 2 runs with a double in the last inning to beat them. And I wasn't sure how well that would go over, but he was delighted when we met and chatted after the game. And I got to know him, and we were able to work together politically. So it had its advantages, and I would have scored myself, but coming around second base, I pulled a muscle in my thigh, and I had to quit the game. But I guess I was getting too old for it.
I know Grandpa coached. Did you ever coach?
I started to later when Stace started playing, like in middle school. But we were able to find a couple of gals who were in high school to take over. What happened was there was a mother who started it, and Stace was very upset because she and her son were driving them nuts, and they weren't making any progress. So she asked me to come and join in, and so I did. And I taught the gals how to hit. And suddenly, you know, their eyes lit up, and they were feeling good about themselves, and they began to win. So yeah, I did some coaching, that kind of thing, and then, of course the boys as they grew up, I would practice with in the backyard, our backyard, and teach them the game. And I think they both were good hitters. I think your father was more interested in it than Paul was at the time. But he went along and was a good hitter also. I think Paul's first time up, I think he bounced one off the wall in left field or something like that. So it didn't quite make it over. So, yeah. What other kind of involvement? We
Was
were,
there? Yeah.
no, no, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say what I mean. It sounds like you were already involved in a lot. Were you involved with anything? Like what else do you remember that you were involved with that like you remember stories about?
Well, mostly, as I say, during the time that we were there, it was the League of Women Voters, and at that particular time, Reynolds Metal Company was wanted to build a plant to. They were just starting to do the aluminum cans, were just coming into being, and Mark had that project, and people were opposed to where they were building it because it was right on the river, and they were concerned about pollution. And we had just worked to clean up the Hudson River so that the fishermen worked with the New York State fishermen could fish again in the river by having sewage treatment plants built, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And by the time we moved out of there, they could fish again in the river. So I was proud of that kind of thing. But the fight with against Reynolds was interesting. Um, when the league came out opposed to the Reynolds project, one of our friends who was a newspaper reporter called Marv and said, "I heard that you and Evelyn are getting divorced because the league is coming out to." He says, "Not that I know of." He says, and I don't speak personal, for publication. So, but no, uh, he understood what the league's objection to was. And what happened was when it was, even though we objected to it, it wasn't us who stopped the project. It was mothers with baby carriages blocking the road so the trucks couldn't get through, which had nothing to do with the league. And when Marv called the head of Reynolds, Dave Reynolds, to come up and take a look, he said, "Find me another piece of property." And it took him about another year or so to find it, but he did find him another piece, not in our county, further north. And the project was built, and he was still the architect for it. So yeah, that was the beginning of the aluminum cans. And as much as they could clean up for the air and everything else, there was still some water problems. So they had then a safe area that they could dispose of the water until it was recycled and etc. So yeah, it was interesting times. And yes, we were usually in the newspaper in one form or another. There was one district attorney who wanted to become something more in the state. So he went after the supervisor of our town, which is like the mayor, who was a friend of Marv, and theoretically, there was a meeting between him and somebody else, one of the builders, at Marv's office. The problem was Marv was not there that day. We were off doing something else or traveling or whatever. So it may have taken place in the office, but he had no knowledge of what occurred. But he had to go testify at the trial as well. And they ultimately, the trial went nowhere. Nothing happened. No money was passed. No deal was made, or anything else. But it created notoriety, newspaper kind of, bad press kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And it was something that the kids grew up with, always seeing their father or mother in the newspaper in one way or another. I was on the back pages, not in the front. So, but when I went to the trial, I sat with one of Marv's attorneys, which was very interesting because he was able to explain the process to me and what was happening and so on. And he was excellent. He was head of the Republican Party in the county. His other attorney, his private attorney, was another friend from the JCs who was head of the Democratic Party in the county. So we didn't play favorites. We had both as friends, and I had gone once with him to a meeting of the Sons of Italy and one of the Jewish groups. And the rabbi giving the blessing that night spoke about the sons of Italy and the sons of Israel and the sons of Rome and the sons of Jerusalem. And I thought any time he was going to say sons of Israel, but he didn't. But those are the kind of things that amuse me. He also did I'm trying to think of one of the projects, was animals. On I can't even think of what she had called it. The woman who started it um, wanted like a county animal shelter.
Hmm.
So he worked with her. Now she was a former bathtub model. I know it sounds strange, but she would be all soaped up as a former model,
What a
and
strange.
so I'm saying the kinds of people that we met were always very interesting,
Yeah, it sounds like it.
and we had a lot of fun doing it. The restaurant that we used to eat at was one of our favorite places. Was where, and I think I had written about it later on in the book, where I had gone to lunch with a friend of mine who was studying law at the time, because she was divorcing her husband, who was an attorney. She ultimately became an assistant DA.
Hmm.
But that particular day, Stace was very little at the time, and went to the bathroom and came back, and we went home. And next time Mom goes into the restaurant, the owner, Louis, says to him, I'd like to show you something. So he took him into the ladies' room and posted all over the wall is Marvin A. Flam Architect little stickers. When Stace was little, she had a career in advertising even at that age. Stace with the wall. I know I couldn't trust her alone doing that kind of thing. But it was fun because one of the people that we knew who was at the restaurant that day that Bob was, was shown this began calling him the urinal architect. So as I say, it was always interesting. Something
Yeah, that sounds like it goes well with his Bathrooms of America videos that I know he's famous for turning on the camera when he thought he was turning it off. Sounds like it fits in theme.
he had the hanging on his shoulder the video camera. Yes, with it on. Sidewalks of the world.
Sidewalk, yeah, sidewalk of the world, yes, yeah,
But it was in the bathroom. Yes.
yeah.
I think it was the one of the international things. I don't know, but yeah, it was fun. Um, I think we've always had fun, and that's been good or bad. I don't know. Good for us, and we traveled with the kids when they were young. We would take one trip with them and one trip without them, because we had both his parents and mine still alive and very willing to babysit. They enjoyed time with the kids. So we would go to Vegas for a weekend or travel on business. And I think on one trip we went up to with the kids to Maine, because one of his clients wanted to buy an island off the coast. So we said that that's the weekend that we normally go out to Long Island with the kids on vacation time. He says, bring the kids along. So we did. So we went up to Portland, and when we went to one of their famous lobster places, each one of them ordered a lobster, and he says they're going to eat that. I mean, yeah, like pros, and they did, and he was amazed. But yes, we would go out to Montauk and those areas at least once every, usually 4th of July weekend. I didn't want them playing with fireworks at home, so those were the weekends that we decided that was make it a tradition. We go see the fireworks out there. So ulterior motive.
I like it. What was your favorite trip that you took with the kids?
With the kids.
Yeah.
Probably one of the bigger ones down to Mexico when they were little. Uh, we did Mexico City and Acapulco, and we went with a couple of clients of Mob's who would tell stories about how, as a young man, he went down there when it was not safe, and he had his own, carrying a gun. He was not the brightest person in the world, but uh, we had fun on that trip. My reluctance was he wanted us to go with him to meet a friend of his that he knew from down there, a business associate, and leave the kids at the hotel alone. It was a good hotel in Mexico City, and I did have them um, check on them periodically. So, but I was still concerned because it's a foreign place, and but we went for dinner uh, and found it and got back, and everything was fine, except the boys were teasing us. That we had two rooms, so they would call her on the telephone from the other room and drive her nuts. And in Acapulco, again, we had gone out one night, and it was only like 10 minutes away. So I wasn't concerned. The boys were old enough to babysit, and I did have the hotel check on them. We stayed at the place where the divers used to dive off the cliff,
Oh, okay.
which was an interesting place. It would not be a place I would stay because also it was, uh, you never knew what we'd be crawling out of the rocks. Kind of thing. I went into the bathroom one day to take a shower, and there was this thing. I just threw a towel at it and ran. Huge bug of some sort, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting trip. But we did enjoy the taking the boat rides and, with the big pirates attacking and things like that. So as far as the kids were concerned, I think they very much enjoyed it. And then on the way back, instead of coming back to New York, we flew up to Los Angeles, and our friends went home. And we went to visit my Uncle Sam, who lived in LA, who was a florist, and they provided flowers for the studios. It was an interesting, in our wedding pictures, if you saw flowers and things like that, he provided them for that.
Mhm.
And I gave them an opportunity to know that there was, more family elsewhere. And Sam took us to some deli, New York style deli, of course, out in Los Angeles. And we had fun. And my cousin Philip was there, and I think one of his sons was also able to join us. So they got to meet some family. Plus, Disneyland had opened in LA, and we took for that. So yeah, that I think was probably the uh, most memorable trip. Maybe they remember it, maybe they don't. I don't know. But on the way home, as we were flying home, we're over Texas, and there's a movie, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, they stopped the movie, so they had an engine problem, and they would
Mm.
have to make an emergency landing in Chicago. Now, does that make sense to you?
No.
No, it didn't make sense to me either. But from Texas, we flew up, landed in Chicago, and changed planes.
It's like 2 hours. Like,
Yes, that's why it
why
didn't
wouldn't you?
make any sense.
Why don't you just land in Houston or Dallas or something like?
Because probably their home base was, out of Chicago, and I
Mm.
don't remember which airline. It could have been American, I don't know.
Mhm.
Anyway, who knows? It was that kind of thing. Uh,
Interesting.
so yes, so we were able to transfer to another flight and come home, and I think it was exciting for them as well. I never got to see the end of the movie because they had something else, but they got another dinner, on board. Um, things like that were very enjoyable to them. So
Yeah. I miss having like food on airplanes. It's so nice when they'd serve you dinner.
when we took them to Aruba, we flew the Dutch Airlines, the Royal Dutch KLM is it, or whatever it is. Anyway, it was tremendous meals. Because we flew first class, and Stacy decided, the little kid, that she was going to help the stewardesses. So she went around to see if everybody was finished with their cake, and if they didn't, she would take it and eat it. Things like that. Uh, I'd asked the stewardesses if it was all right, she. And they said, "Oh no, she's no problem. That's fine." So things like that occurred. It, always interesting, and the kids were bored on Aruba because there really wasn't much to see.
Mm.
We tried to get out of there, and we couldn't get a flight to San Juan, Puerto Rico, which was a better place for them to be and enjoy. And we had to say there was an emergency and that we had to go back to New York. So we took a flight to New York, which stopped in San Juan, took our luggage off, and stayed there. That's how we got out of the country.
Wow, interesting.
Uh, and they enjoyed it tremendously. They got to hear the Lone Ranger in Spanish. They got excited about that kind of thing, and they seem to really love it.
Mhm.
Uh, uh, I'm trying to think of what else happened there. I can't recall at the moment, but I know there were a couple of stories. One of them was we went to the old city, old where they had the flamenco dances,
Mm.
and Stacy cuddled up with me. I said, "What's the matter?" She says, "They're mad at me." They're very stern faces from the dancing. I said, "No, no, no, that's part of the dance." I said, "Wait until it's over," because we were sitting right near them. And so when it was over and they bowed and smiled, I said, "See, they're not mad at you." But we're talking like a 4 or 5 year old or something at the time. So
Yeah,
it was interesting times for them.
yeah. So I know you guys had a dog at when you lived in Pearl River. It sounds like nobody was excited for the dog, from what I've heard stories.
Uh, they decided they were buying me a dog for my birthday. Uh,
Who?
More than the kids.
Okay.
And what happened was I was inside, the boys and Marv and Stace were in the backyard, and for some reason the dog, I was told, could have been accidentally, I don't know, but bit her lip. And I said the dog goes. We rushed her to the hospital. I had called ahead, and fortunately, we were able to get one of the plastic surgeons to stay there until we arrived. And so there's no marking at the moment, but it was scary for me.
Yeah.
He was a good dog, but a dog with a temper, in a sense, and people he liked and people he didn't. He didn't like my Uncle Morris, and he had him up on the couch one day when they came to visit, which I found interesting. And he's the one that, when I was about 2 or 3 years old, punched and gave him a bloody nose or a black eye. I don't know which. So it was not unusual. I figured he had good sense. Not them. All right. Anyway,
How,
that's yeah. What
how
else?
long did you how long did you have Sandy, right? That was the dog's name?
Yeah. Probably about a year or so, or a little bit under that. It really wasn't a long time.
Mm.
And I really did not want to be tied down to a dog. So it, my grandmother had cats, and
Yes.
yeah,
Like mine.
yeah, yeah, I see. Uh, so I don't know. Uh, but yeah, traveling with the kids was always good. I think, had a lot of fun. Larry would go. Your father would go with Paul and Ma fishing sometimes. He's the one who'd curl up at the bow and go to sleep. He wasn't interested in the fishing.
Yes, I've heard that.
And we would often cook the catch on the beach, which was interesting.
That's
Flounder,
fun.
yeah. I understood, held a record for catching one of the largest fluke in the bay, Shinnecock Bay, until a couple of years after we stopped going there. Some woman, I think, caught something like about 16 pounds.
Yeah.
Broke my 9-pound record. So,
Wow.
so there you are.
That's impressive.
Yes. Yeah, we had fun doing a lot of things. Montauk Point was a place where they had some, like a famous lobster house. So as I say, when we went with the other people to Maine and things like that, these are kids who were brought up eating lobster. You know. Of course, never on the Jewish holidays. Oh, somebody said, "Oh, only on Sunday in a Chinese restaurant."
Makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. What other tales did you have in mind? Our
Oh,
travels.
what?
I say our travels as well.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So where did you guys go?
Uh, During the time we lived there, we had a group that would travel on gambling junkets. So we would go to Puerto Rico, we would go to Las Vegas, and one of the trips was to Montecarlo, which I thought was fascinating. I liked the hotel, and I liked the feel of everything around it. I just didn't like the casino. I felt it was cold. I could not sit and comfortably gamble there. And I said to Mom, I'm not gonna play. I'll watch. He said, why? I said, it doesn't feel good to me. And they even had an American room.
Hmm.
Come and bring your money, and we'll take it. Uh, they had the group that we were with sat and planned one morning that they were going to go in and see if they could break the bank at Monte Carlo. Well, that night they all gathered around the table, and I think they got wiped out in 20 seconds, no, 20 minutes, which was fascinating. So it became an experience. And the next time we were down in, I'm not sure whether it was Vegas or San Juan, we wound up sitting on the stage uh, because they had given our seats away, and to apologize, they set up 3 tables on the stage for us. And so when the show was over, somebody from the back of the room yelled, "Hi guys!" It was somebody who had been on that trip to Monte Carlo. It came running down, and people were looking like, "Who the hell are these people up there?" But yeah, it was always interesting. An interesting group of people to travel with. Some of the dumbest things I've seen. There was one woman when we were in Monte Carlo who had asked the waiter, uh, they serve a cheese tray after dinner. And so she, um, rather than asking the names of the specific cheeses, held up a piece and said, "What is this?" And the waiter said, "Fromage," which means cheese.
Right.
She says, and I'm listening to her on the plane going back. She says, and Harry, remember, when we go to the deli, you tell them you want that fromage. Like, can you imagine the reaction of what, what kind of fromage, you know?
Right.
She didn't know that there was a difference, you know, it was that kind of thing. It's like that struck me funny. So we went to, in Rome, uh, they had a guide, and we were supposed to meet them that night in this, oh, I don't know, restaurant, nightclub kind of thing, downstairs someplace. We had wandered off on our own that day. This, they were they wanted to take the guided tour, and we wanted to see certain things that weren't on it. So we basically walked around with our
Wow.
own map, and had a lot of fun. Wound up at some restaurant helping the owner write the menu for the summer, because when the Americans come to translate it to English for them, which things like that we had fun doing. We stopped for a drink later in the day and were talking, and three guys came over to the table. They were astronauts. They heard American being spoken. Can we join you? So they joined us for a drink, that kind of thing. The night we went to meet them, uh, the guy who was their tour guide kept looking at me and saying, "You," because I talk with my hands, as you know, uh, "you're Italian, Northern Italy. I can tell." I said, "No, oh no, no. He's I got to be Italian, Northern Italy." So that was a whole evening's discussion. Why? Because I would drink the whatever, post dinner drinks and things like that properly, not like some of the others that he had seen. So no, well, we grew up going to a lot of New York restaurants, so I was prepared.
Hmm. Yeah.
And speaking of restaurants, on our trip to Hawaii, we had all gone to a Chinese restaurant that we normally met at, and the bus picked us up there, and we were off to the plane. We landed in Chicago to pick up more people, uh, and then in San Francisco. And in San Francisco, one of the guy's sisters met us at the airport with them some and stuff from Chinatown in San Francisco with a tray of it for us to take us to Hawaii. We had fun in Hawaii, but on the island there was a black owl who ran the jewelry shop on our second leg of the journey in Hawaii. We had stayed in Honolulu first and then went elsewhere. And it was there that this happened, and they were Southerners who were picking on her because she was black.
Mm.
And Law defended her and threw the guys out of the shop. And word got around the island, and Bob said he had had it with these guys staying at the hotel. He says, "We're going to leave. We're not staying." So we went back to um, Honolulu for one night, and then we were going to fly either to Vegas or somewhere. Or we wound up in San Francisco, but when we went back to the hotel, the word had gotten out of what had happened, and they wouldn't charge us for the room. And
Yeah.
they sent us a rum-soaked pineapple that was cut. It was delicious. Things
Nice.
like that. When we got to San Francisco, we decided to do a little sightseeing and then called his sister, this guy's sister, and had met us at the airport with the hors d'oeuvres. And she said, "Where can we take you?" And we said, "We've done our sightseeing, so you don't have to do that. Just let's get together and meet at your favorite restaurant." So it was a Japanese restaurant sitting on the floor. in downtown San Francisco that they loved. And she was drinking a lot. And I had to stop her because with her chopstick, she was about to pick up her dead cigarette and eat it. I said, no, not that, And she, oh my God, thank you, whatever. We, they wouldn't let us pay for anything. They also took us to a place called the Bocce Bowl, which is a place where the opera singers would come. The opera house was around the corner from it after shows, and they would sing. So the waiters sang, people sang, they got up and sang opera. So it was a very pleasant, kind of thing that we never expected to experience.
Yeah.
So things like that. That's part of the trips that we made in those days.
Mm.
One trip with the kids, one trip without the kids. So. Yes.
Nice. Well, it's like 3:00 now, so we can wrap up for this week.
Okay.
Talk about, I don't know, more about living in Pearl River, or we can move on to Ridgewood. If there are other stories, I'll look back and see what else I wanted to ask you. So.
You could always send me a note, let me know, and I'll see if I can recall some of them. Every place has a ton of stories that we travel to because it's always been fun to travel, and both with the kids and on our own. And we were very fortunate to have parents who were there to help make it possible. I wouldn't have let them with strangers. So.
Yeah. Yes. Well, and the tradition continued because you guys came and stayed with us several times.
Yeah.
My parents went out.
Yeah. Yes, and then most enjoyable for us.
Yeah. Although I remember one time, I think it was when they went to Hawaii, that like Jason and I were both like really sick. Right? Was that when they went to Hawaii? It might have been. I think. Yeah, I don't know. One of the trips that, because I think you guys came, I think one day you went to Hawaii, and then did you guys come when they went to Paris too?
I don't know. I don't recall. I know we were there several times, but yes, we always enjoyed that.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, then we'll wrap up this week and we'll talk again next week.